evening, everyone, and welcome. Can you hear me? Welcome to the February 19th South Burlington Development Review Board. My name is Dawn Philibert. I'm the chair of the board, and I thank you all for coming. Let me introduce the other members of the board who are with us tonight. Charlie Johnston, John Moscatelli, Jody Lesko, Frank Kochman, Mark Baer, Quinn Mann, myself, Dawn Philibert, and our staff, Marla Keene and Marty Gillies. This meeting is being recorded. There are a number of ways to participate in this meeting. One is to attend as you are. And if you are in attendance, please make sure you've signed up in the attendance sheet up back so we have a record of who has participated in this meeting. And if you're attending virtually, please provide your contact information in the chat box. So again, we have a record of your participation. And if you're calling in, please send your contact information to, I don't have my cheat sheet.
All right. Yeah, so you can send your contact information to me, Marla Keene. Email address is mkeene@sbvt.gov.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's start with the first item on the agenda, emergency evacuation procedures. In the case of an emergency, you would exit either of the two doors in the corner of the auditorium, turn left or right to be outside, and you'd be hopefully safe. Second agenda item, are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items?
No.
No. Okay. Any announcements? Hearing none. Any comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? Okay. Item number 5, which is reconsideration of conditional use application CU 2407, has been withdrawn. We don't have to vote on that, do we?
No.
No. Okay. So we will move on to number 6, which is continued site plan application SB 2501 of John Wilking to develop an existing 1.88 acre parcel with a 5,400 square foot one-story medical office building and an associated vehicle paving area, stormwater management system, and other site improvements at 40 Kimball Avenue. Who is here for the applicant?
There we go. I'm on now. Dawn, I'm John Wilking. With me today is Carl Marshall.
Carl, is it?
Carl.
Carl, thank you.
From O'Leary Burke, our civil engineer.
Yes.
Joseph Green from Joseph Architects behind me. Mm-hmm. And my partners, Tyler Atten and Nushi Brown. They will be the owner users of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
How was your trip, by the way?
It was great. Thank you.
Good.
Wonderful time.
Good. Welcome back.
Sorry I missed the meeting in between, but.
If you could all raise your right hand, I'm going to swear you in. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay. So since the last meeting, John, you have submitted some additional information, and tonight we are going to go through that.
And I have a few handouts that
Okay.
may help it along the way if I can approach.
Sure.
Thank you. One there. Just do a little sharing tonight.
Quinn and I can share. Thank you. So I'll say this while you're doing that. The first comment basically says, directs the board to walk through all the other comments, which is what we do. So we'll go ahead and skip to number 2. And the second comment is in relation to the site amenity requirements and options for meeting the requirements. You've had a chance to look at all these. So.
You bet. Yeah, we've looked at it we've looked at the site amenities in several different ways. As you know, we had it tucked in at the back left corner originally because we felt it was the best use of it, frankly, where we put it originally. We think we'd get more use out of it from both 30 Kimball and 40 Kimball in its original location. We understand that that's not where the board wanted us to go, so we brought it up to the street, and we admit that it's in the right-of-way, but we think that it's in the ideal location at the street. And so the first page of the handout that I gave you, page 2, item 2, option A, has it right up on the street. And we think it will get used there. It's not on the street, it's on the sidewalk, but it does fall within the setback of the city. We like it where we put it on the street side, and we hope you'll approve it this way. One comment that was made was that the bike rack could not be included in that location, so we put an optional bike rack location at the bottom of the stairs. That's behind the parklet, and on the left you see it right at the bottom of those stairs. So we do have all the bike. No, that's the detail option. There's a full page. It is page 2, option 2. Let's see. That's it. So it's hard to see, but if you zoomed in on the parklet and left a little bit towards the building, yeah, okay. At the bottom of the staircase, as you're looking up at it, on my left, I think it's your left too, is an alternate bike rack location.
Good.
So we have 2 bike racks shown. We actually have 3 bike racks shown because we have one shown in the parklet as well.
What is root prune?
I think root prune is when you.
You gotta turn on your mic.
I mean, Mike's not here, but I think root prune is basically just management of existing vegetation.
Can't hear you. Sorry.
Just management of existing, root vegetation.
So the tree you see to the left of the park, the one that's branched out, is an existing tree. And
Right.
so they're just pruning the roots to make sure that they don't damage the tree while doing the work around it.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So our preference is to put it in the setback and to have it be in what we think is the most useful place. Again, if we had our choice, we'd put it in the back corner where it would get used regularly by both buildings. But if not, let's put it as close to the street as possible and get it used by the most public as possible.
Okay.
If you say no to that, we have an option B. So 3 pages back is page 2, item 2, option B.
Prefer this to option B?
We prefer this overall. We don't think you'll approve the one in the back. So if we're going for one versus A versus B, we'd prefer A. B basically puts it, and we'll look at a site map. Oh, you've got the site map. That's good. It pulls it to the left of the site a little bit further beyond the existing tree. And we haven't quite figured out whether we need to have steps down to it first and then additional steps down beyond that. It would require building it up quite a bit, building up the land around it quite a bit to make B work. But
Like an amphitheater.
yeah, it's an option. It gets it out of it gives you what you're asking for. It gets it out of the setback, and it has all the It has the size requirement. It has
Okay.
plenty of landscaping. So I guess in terms of this item, we would ask that you approve option A in the setback.
Okay, let's talk about that. Thank you, John. Board, what are your thoughts?
I assume that, as in most literal rights-of-ways, the city owns a right-of-way, not the underlying land. So the underlying land is part of the lot. Is that correct?
No, the dotted line there is I don't know if you can see it. That's the boundary of John's property.
That's the boundary of.
Property line.
That's the property line, yeah.
Property line? All right, so
The original proposal was just in the city's land. It wasn't on John's land at all. So that's why we flagged it as being impermissible. I don't know if the board has the authority to allow John to develop on not his land.
well, but it's within the right-of-way, correct?
The option A was within the city's right of way, yes.
Could
And
you go
still-
back to that,
And
please?
still is, right?
Still is, yes. Option B, right. Option A they didn't fix. Option A is still.
Used about the term right-of-way. John, do you know whether?
Option A is in the city street.
Yes, the staff is correct. Option A is on city land at this point. If you
Land
look,
that the city owns?
if you look at the first page, the plan on the first page, you'll see the dotted line for our where the front of our lot is on both the left and right lower sides. And if you just follow that through that dotted line,
And you understand the distinction I'm making between your lot line and?
sure, I
So
understand
you
it.
do not own the underlying land? the
That's
land
correct.
underlying the right-
We think it's best put there, but
All right.
it's
But-
whatever you want.
Well, in that case, you can't have it there.
Okay. Then we would go with option B.
Or at
Is
least
that-
we don't have discretion, I don't think, to let you put it there.
Is that your opinion, Frank?
That is my strong opinion.
Okay. All right.
What discretion do we have to allow use of city land?
None. The city's charter gives authority over the use of city land to the city manager.
City council, all right. So that's the end of option A.
Yeah, so A is done.
Sorry.
Okay, we would like you to approve option B then.
Questions about B?
Now, I guess that being said, if you were to go to the city manager and they said, yes, you can have this, the board has the authority to approve site amenities, I believe, within 200 feet or something of the property. Or is that just form-based code?
That is a rule in the form-based code. I don't know if it's a rule outside, and it can't be. It can only be like up to 50% of the total site amenity credit. Yeah.
So there's half a path forward if you really thought this was the best option.
We're on a time crunch, and frankly, getting in front of the city council and doing that is probably not something that we're likely to want to do.
Okay, so it's B. Questions about B?
On this detail we have, what's the dark dash line highlighting?
So that's the measuring area to
to
prove
get
that we
your
have the right
amenity.
size amenity, yes. Yeah.
You might have clarified this, but I might have missed it. Just for my understanding of the location of the bike racks, you have one in the site amenity. You have the alternative bike rack location going up to the building. Does that mean you're either going to put a bike rack in the site amenity or in that alternative location, or are you proposing all three that are
No,
shown
so
on the property?
the alternative one is for option A. For option B, we've put the bike rack in, but we have not counted it in our square footage.
Right.
And so it would go in the site amenity as a separate item in the site amenity. But it would, in option B, it's planned in the site amenity,
Okay, yeah, and I understand you're taking that square footage out.
right?
My
So we would-
simpler
so we
version of
would
the
then
question,
have-
there's
We would have one more beyond that, and that's up by the door.
by the door of the
Yep.
building and not
Yep.
on the path. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? We ready to move on?
Just briefly on this one. So we just got these today at noon. We haven't had a chance to formally review. I would say that one of the standards that has previously been met requires a direct pedestrian connection to the site, which has been provided by, like a perpendicular sidewalk between the city street and the site. And option B, it's no longer as short as possible. And so then that kind of, even though that's something that we had previously resolved, that sort of reopens that can of worms. Is that a direct pedestrian connection?
How could it be shorter? It's not, the second it gets on my land, it's there. It's as close to the, it's almost on city land. It can't get shorter.
It is shorter in in option A for a pedestrian to get from this Kimball Ave sidewalk to
But
your
it's not-
property.
It's not on my land. You just said I can't do
Yeah,
option A, so.
the connecting
to
point
me,
is between the sidewalk and the, right?
Right.
To hit the edge of his land.
I believe, yeah, sorry, I believe it's to the building.
Oh,
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, when I said the site, I didn't mean to your property line. I meant to like the developed portion, like where someone would be walking to the building entrance.
I'm sorry, Marty, could you say your question again?
Sure.
please?
I'm just saying that while I appreciate your speed in producing new plans, it does kind of produce this challenge where this looks good, but then, we realize a week later, oh, shoot, one of the standards requires the direct pedestrian connection between the right-of-way and the public entrance. And because this is now a big jog in your sidewalk that didn't exist before, we can't, it just raises issues. So I just wanted to flag that at this time.
So you're saying that it needs to be the shortest possible route to the entrance of the building?
Correct. And that was one of the comments
Okay, well,
in your first.
so I would argue the intention is to put a stoplight at 30 Kimball sometime soon. Most traffic, I mean, when I see people walking out there, they're walking from the busy side, the busy end, which is Kennedy Drive, and a few people pass us, but almost everybody is in that first three buildings, and nobody really goes down the street. Hopefully, they will someday. But this is closer. This actually is closer to.
Sure. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying that I don't want us to feel like, oh, this is done and dusted, because this could, when you introduce new plans, compliance with other regulations can come up. And so I just wanted to flag that for both the board and you at this time.
Fair enough.
So Marty, is this like a DRB discretion as long as we review it and say we feel it's appropriate, or is this a must as opposed to a should?
This is, I don't know, I don't have the language in front of me. I just know it's one of the standards, and, it could be something like condition of approval. If you said, this is fine, or if we review the language and it's a must, then maybe you say, okay, this is fine, and add stairs on the right side of the tree as well. Or,
Well,
For this
and
specific standard, I do remember the standard is, there is some flexibility, because I remember other cases where a jog was introduced for one of the reasons you just described, another where it was like to have a ramp instead of stairs. So I do remember that there's a little bit of board discretion here.
Because I think it's fine as designed.
yeah. Well, I was going to ask, can you eliminate the stairs because it's longer?
No.
there's a substantial change in grade from the street to the building. What is it, 5 feet?
Typical stairs are 7-inch rise, and it's like 3 feet of grade to break, so it's pretty substantial. So, and the other reason why it's positioned the way it is obviously, that big green tree that you see that we're pruning that preserve the tree. So kind of position around it. That's another major reason. But I understand what Marty said, so we just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with it, because this is, the one that's right on the line. And like John said, skirting around the tree, and then a few stairs to break the grade, and then you're kind of right at the sidewalk. That's pretty darn close, but I think that's what it is. If we're going to preserve the tree and provide it right on the right-of-way line, that's the property line. This is this is the best we can do, unless you want to, cut the tree down.
Did you change the plant species between what you had previously submitted and
Yes.
this?
Yes. Yeah, the on the beach, the American beach.
No, sorry. The plantings that are all in this area, are they the same plants that were in the area when it was over here? when it was in the,
I believe they're the same plants, yeah.
because I was just brainstorming like things that might be reopened when you relocated it, and that would be another one if there's other stuff for the horticulturist to review. But it sounds like it's
I don't
already
thi-
been.
yeah,
They didn't have any comments when they were in a different location, so I can't.
Yeah,
imagine
no, I
they
don't
would
believe
care.
we changed those at all.
Okay, any other questions or comments about that? All right, let's move on to number 3, which I'll read. Prior to closing the hearing, staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide updated plans demonstrating that the proposed development will not have any impact on the 100-foot river corridor.
Okay, so you have a new site plan in your package. It's the next page of the group. And you'll see the orange dotted line, which is the city's required area that we stay out of, and we are staying out of it 100%.
Okay? Questions from the board? Pardon? Questions? Going, gone? Okay.
Did you end up? Yeah, there's a lot more retaining wall in this case.
Yes, we've extended the retaining wall.
Okay.
We've removed the boulders. We liked the boulders, but we've removed the boulders that also were a bit back there, and we're staying off your 100-foot line.
Thank you. Okay, number 4. I think we have addressed this already, bike rack.
Yes, that's so we've now got 2 bike racks. One is in the amenity, but it's on our land, and the other is close to the building.
Okay, and we're looking for a bike locker for commuters.
So we showed last time, I think, a locker in our locker area, and I think staff agrees that we complied. We actually are planning to put 2 lockers in there. We had planned that from the beginning because they're 36 by 12 by 18.
Okay.
We're happy to label them, if you'd like, bike locker, but we want the lockers to be in the locker room. We don't want to make all of our lockers bigger because we don't need bigger lockers.
Right.
So, short of creating its own room, which we don't think we need to do, we've covered it, and we've actually done it. We've doubled it.
Okay. Questions, board?
I have an ignorant question. What's the point of the quote bike locker? What goes in the bike locker?
I would assume maybe like your sweaty clothes and your bike helmet or something. But for whatever reason, the LDRs prescribe a specific size, and they meet the requirement. But I guess the intent of the requirement is that presumably bikers need a certain size locker. And if the locker were being used by someone not a biker and then someone biked and had an exactly bike locker sized amount of stuff that didn't fit in a regular size locker.
Do bikes fit in the bike locker?
No.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So in a 300-page document, we can have a few absurdities, right?
Sure. So that was just, it meets the standards, but in case people felt that there was an issue, I just wanted to flag it.
Okay.
And we are prepared, if you'd like, to label the locker a bike locker.
Thank you. Okay, number 6.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry,
Sure,
clarifying.
Jody,
You were
go
saying
ahead.
that you were going to you're going to do 2 lockers or just 1?
It's 2.
Yeah, great. Just wanted to make sure I understood.
They've always been stacked lockers,
Got it.
and if we're stacking one big one, we're not going to put a little one on top of it. So,
Makes
so
sense.
it's so it's 2 larger stacked lockers.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Replacement of the American beech tree.
Next page. So it was the beech tree was specific to a snow storage area in the top left corner of the page 3, item 6 plan.
Top left. Is up yours.
Nope, you're too far down. It's before that, right up there.
They're not in the same order for me
Oh, I'm
as they
sorry.
are in what you handed out, which is why I'm
okay.
flailing around so badly. I don't think we've looked at this one yet. Could it possibly be this one? No.
That looks like,
That's option
no,
A.
that's not it either. That's,
Is this sheet, page 3, item 6?
yeah. It's, you've got it in your packet. It says page 3, item 6 in the top right corner. And the tree in question is in the top left corner where it says snow storage. It now is a QC1 on the left-hand corner. It was previously a beech, and the horticulturist for the city was concerned that if we put snow there, it would damage the tree. We've changed it to a, what's a QC? A
Usually a
scarlet
maple.
oak.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any questions, board? All right, moving on to number 7. This is about the parking lot landscape islands.
Yes. Oh, by the way, we included a new budget and landscape piece there for you so that you'd have clarity on that. So we'd like to have a little discussion about the landscape
A little
islands.
discussion.
Very short. We promise we won't cause problems here, but staff methodology, I gave you a little sheet that looks like this. This is page 4, item 7, discussion. The left side is is how staff measures islands, and the right side is how our landscape architect, our civil architect, and many of the cities around here use as a standard. The difference is that the corners are cut in the way our staff does it, and if that's how you choose as a group to measure, then we lose 1 parking space that we didn't want to lose. We would argue that there is no methodology in the LDRs. A more common methodology is the way we did it originally, and we would have saved a parking space. We'd like you to approve it the way that our landscape architect sees it most often. We have done the next page in your package has it done the way that the city wants it done, and we end up with 35. We originally tried to get 40 parking spaces, and then we got to 37. Now we're at 35. We would like very much to have 36 or 37 or 38 or 39, but we've cut this back significantly, and we think that these angles don't make sense. So the angles I'm talking about are on the top left. If you look in staff methodology, top left corner, they cut the corner on the square that we removed, and the right hand corner closest to the building, they cut the corner as well. Both those cases, those were full spaces that were removed, but we only got half the credit. I don't really get it. Our architects, our civil folks don't get it. We've done it the way you've asked for it because that's what you've asked for, but we would like to have that parking space back.
Can staff comment on the methodology used, just so we can, I understand, I see the cut, but can you just comment on the methodology so we can understand your perspective?
So the initial submission from John didn't include the calculation correctly. It was, I guess the islands go in both the numerator and the denominator, and so they didn't quite have that right. So we let them know that they weren't meeting the requirement and provided this graphic. The interior of the parking lot, I guess, as I understand it, is the landscape island sort of is supposed to project into the parking lot. And so the triangles that we cut out are not, if you were to draw a circle around the limits of where cars actually park, those corners aren't in them. Cars park, I guess, like adjacent to them, but if you were to sort of draw the smallest possible circle around all the parking spaces, those outside corners aren't in them, so that's why we don't include them. John's correct that there's no methodology in the LDRs, so it is up to your interpretation, and that's why it's just staff's recommendation.
And is that
Yeah, so I've
standard
pulled-
methodology for staff?
Right, yeah.
Okay,
So I
got
pulled
it.
up the standard. This is all it says. At least 10% of the interior of the parking lot shall be landscaped islands, which gets to Marty's point about the islands are intended to be within the parking lot. No one has ever said this. There's a standard methodology outside of what we've been doing, and I'm, interested to know more about that. The way Marty has it is the way we've been doing it. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's the way, approvals for the past 7 years have been done. And if there's a standard in the industry, I'm happy to hear about it, but it doesn't seem like this is standard language either, so I'd be surprised if there was.
I can just say my experience in standard industry is you square off the parking lot and then your island, the whole thing is counted. You basically look at it like this, and then that corner is your island. Because you're kind of looking at the parking lot as a squared off thing, not an amorphic shape, And that's just the way I've always done it when I had to measure my landscape islands.
What would you
So that's
do down in this
consistent.
corner here, Mark?
That's consistent with what
That
we're
corner on the
saying.
left,
Yeah,
the bottom left,
because the parking extends farther down on the right-hand side of the aisle than the left.
that's kind of up for interpretation, I guess. I would almost say you split the difference by going straight across and then up to the island, and the drive aisle that's part of those parking lots are counted as part of the parking lot. I'm talking about more about the upper left landscape island and the lower right, landscape island where they're cut off, the whole half of it's cut off.
Yes, and when we originally did this, we also argued that the top right was cut off. We're not arguing that anymore. We originally thought, there were 2 more spaces. We're not arguing that because we can't go into that space
Right.
because it
Right.
exceeds the orange line.
And that's why I wasn't.
But the perfect
including that.
example is that right-hand one was a full space.
Right,
It was a parking space, and I'm getting half credit for
right.
it. That doesn't seem right.
Whether it's Marla or Marty drew the little sketch, that's how I would have calculated your asphalt for your parking lot, rather than diagonally up. So you end up with a little more asphalt. I don't know how it would ultimately play out from a calculations standpoint if you were to include the quarters or the halves of the 2 spots that got cut off, but you add in that amount of asphalt there.
Well, we did the calculation for what we think is the more common methodology, and we have 1,431 square feet of green space. So we cover it. We need to have 1,318 or something, and
But if you look up on the screen, you see the red line,
yes,
Red or orange?
the red or orange, whatever the where you sort of come across and down, and you include the parking aisle for those parking spaces. You don't sort of come up diagonally across it. I'm saying is you end up with a little more asphalt, but I would argue that you do include the green.
but if you include the green,
I don't know if
on the
what that
right-hand
works out.
side, we come up with 1481, so we're well over the standard. I don't think we'd have a concern with adding that little piece in because we're well over the standard already.
Yeah, I suspect 10% of that is more than the little diagonals that you cut out.
Exactly.
You're exactly right. Like I did the calculation. I was talking to Mike Busher, TJ Boyle, and
Yep.
we were kind of looking at this together a little bit. And you're absolutely right. The purple is sort of like whatever that number is. You take 10%, so it's obviously it's not gonna make much difference. Really, what makes a big difference is little subtle changes in the green. Obviously, those are all additive. And like John said, the frustration is really the fact that those were parking spaces, then we lost them and we were just kind of cutting across. Like this way, it's all sort of 90s, and it kind of forms, around the perimeter. Obviously, the purple to the right gets higher, but when you add in the green space, we're getting 1 extra parking space, which would be, we'd like to go back to 37, but Mike and I don't think we can get back to 37. But the one on the right shows 36, and the one on the left shows 35. And I think we'd like the board to considering letting us have that one back.
Basically, the one that's like in the white. On the
Yeah, the white.
right-hand side.
Yeah.
The white is sort of a representation of the one that when you look at them side by side, the one that we gave.
One that got away.
One, yeah. The one that got. Yeah, the one that got away. It's a good way to. Yeah, it's a good way to put it, John.
So, would there be any value in having staff look at other municipal standards for measuring this to see if,
Maybe in the future, but this is a board application, so it's ultimately your decision. And then, it's maybe like a planning commission conversation if we want to have standardized language for how to calculate landscape islands, but it's ultimately your call.
okay.
Yeah, I thank the applicant for showing the side by side. I personally probably have to think about it more, just that because this is the standard that we have seen this kind of cut off to really think about like the interior. But I feel like I have sufficient information to consider it in deliberations.
Fair enough, and we'll accept whatever you decide.
Yeah.
We would much prefer, one parking space actually makes a difference to us.
Sure.
And so we'd like every parking space we can get our hands on.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions?
One comment from me. So the retaining wall was not in the original plans. The original plans were reviewed by City Stormwater. City Stormwater did not review the retaining wall and the impact that they may or may not have on stormwater. They gave us some preliminary feedback, but Marisa, who's the staff person, has been on vacation and so hasn't been able to review this yet. But the one thing that the preliminary review that we got, there were no details for the retaining wall. So that would be one thing that we would need in order to complete a review of the retaining wall, is details for the retaining wall.
Yep. So we actually inquired with Tim Hardy. He's the structural engineer, and he showed us the most elaborate proprietary, like you just go out and hire somebody to do a retaining wall, like a stack block precast. And he shared it with John and I. It was like a 7-sheet set of plans. I'd never seen anything that elaborate for just a precast system. So what Tim said is you basically consult with however many you want, and then they produce a set of plans. We actually, we don't design retaining walls, but anything under 8 feet, I feel like you don't really need a design, but we're going to do one, and we'll provide it with whichever one we choose.
Yeah,
But in terms of stormwater, the actual stormwater, we're collecting all of the stormwater that runs off. I'm not saying you don't deserve the answer you're asking for, but we are collecting all the water that flows off the parking lot now and taking it to a stormwater retention area. And just because it's interesting to me, I'll tell you that the state has determined that we don't need a stormwater permit. We're too small. So that's not city, that's state. But the state is not even after us for a stormwater permit. This is too small.
Well,
too small. Yeah.
The other thing too is, I mean, just so the board knows, obviously Marissa will comment, but our intention is it sheets off now and it's not picked up. It's a gravel parking lot. So the reason we're curbing it and putting in the 3 catch basins is to pick it up and reroute it to the system that we're going to create. So you're going to go from one scenario where existing parking lot sheets off directly into, north, and now we're going to pick it up and bring it to a detention facility.
And just so you know, I've highlighted the retaining wall that Stormwater was interested in. They're not asking you about the one around the parking lot. They're
Okay.
asking you about the
I'm
one
sorry.
that's in
Oh, okay.
in the berm.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I actually asked that very specific question, just so you're aware, about if we should do a cast-in-place wall. And that's when Tim provided us a detail that I'd never seen, but you can actually precast around a pipe. And I saw the level of detail. I'd never seen anything like that before, but it was very interesting. And so it is definitely doable in a precast or in a poured situation.
So I think just generally Stormwater was looking for just a little information. I think they had just some questions about how it might interact with the spillway and with the outlet pipe. I assume maybe the answer is it will interact in a non-important way, but they just wanted to make sure.
The wall is going to break the grade, and we're going to take it to the natural bottom of whatever the natural ground is, right at that orange line, so we don't cross it. That's the intention of the plan. And, the intention for minimizing, to prevent any erosion is always to have the pipe lay on natural ground. So that's what this is going to do. And then, the spillway was one of the comments. And so we don't disagree. It's just, it's really hard, to be honest, it's really hard to overcome a system like that with 3 catch basins. The fact of the matter is it's inlet controlled. There's only 3 catch basins that can bring water to it. So it's really inlet controlled.
But we'll
We'll deal with Marissa and whatever comments and to their satisfaction, so that
yeah. So if the board finds that we need to accommodate stormwater for the city, we'll accommodate stormwater for the city.
Yeah.
Sure. I think the last piece of that is just that, according to the LDRs, retaining walls over 8 feet in height do require conditional use approval.
yeah, that's why there's nothing over 8 feet.
Right. But we just didn't have a way to know that.
No, that fair enough. Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions before we turn to public comment?
Well, I have one more when you're ready.
Board? Okay, John, go ahead.
So I hate to bring this up, but there's this tree that's going to block our solar that is in the city right away. How do we deal with that? We think it's an administrative problem you're going to face time and time again now that you have a requirement for solar. The trees that are in the way of solar either need to go or you need to not require solar. I mean, it's just not fair to...
I think that you can ask the city arborist for permission to clear.
Okay, okay. So that's between us and the city arborist.
You're not talking about the tree that you're asking for credit to retain.
No.
Okay.
There's an oak tree to the right hand. It's about halfway down the building, and it sits 3 feet off 4 feet off the sidewalk. Is
it shown as removed in this plan?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the city arborist reviewed your plans
Okay.
and said it's cool. You just got to ask for permission to do it.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Didn't want
Any
to
other
bring it up, but-
questions before we turn to public comment? Nope. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to weigh in and make comments about this project? I don't see any here. Are there any online? Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Jody. Any discussion? All in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Thank you for,
Thank you, Dawn.
and you'll be hearing from
Mark.
us.
Frank, it's been good seeing you again.
Always a pleasure, John. I'll go ahead and start this off. Thank you. Okay, the next project is continued site plan application. I'm sorry. That was the previous one. Final plat application SD 2501 of Beta Technologies, Inc. to subdivide an existing 901.6 acre lot development with an airport complex. The subdivision consists of creating 3 lots of 3.01 acres, Lot A, 0.92 acres, Lot B, and 0.14 acres, Lot C, for the purpose of leasing the lots to Beta Technologies and retention of the parent lot. The project does not involve land development at 1150 Airport Drive. So I was not here for the original review of this application, and this is a very complex issue. I started to read it, and I'm like, why don't I remember this? And then Marla reminded me, well, you weren't there. And because of the complexity and because I'm not familiar, I haven't been down that road yet, our vice chair, Quinn, has generously offered to run this part of the hearing. Thank you, Quinn. Take it
Yes.
away.
Yeah, so just to start off, who's here for the applicant? I think you've probably been sworn in before, but just to make sure we have that, introduce yourselves and I'll swear you in.
Thank you very much. My name is Nick Longo, and I'm the director of the airport.
Alex Gagnon. I work for Beta Technologies. Chris Gendron with Stantec Consulting Services.
And do you have anyone online? Just the three of you?
We do not, and yeah, we do not. We might have somebody joining us in just a second, but
Okay, we can, if they end up speaking up, we can swear them in. So raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay. Since it's been a little while since we've seen this application, it is a bit complicated. Do you have any opening remarks you want to make before we jump into the staff reports we have here?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you again. And I also wasn't here at the last presentation. I understand that there, I would use the same word, some complexities to the situation, and really appreciate your time and review of the project. This, to us, the airport, is a tenant lease associated with what is documented in the documents that you have today. And we have some very unique circumstances associated with this particular lease, and more appropriately, this particular site. What we're talking about really is inside of the air side, or inside of the fence line of our secured space of the airport, which comes with serious federal obligations that we must hold. That not only includes Federal Aviation Administration obligations, but also Department of Homeland Security obligations that require us to retain a free and clear zone for very particular spaces in that area, not just driving spaces, but spaces that were federally funded within that space. And that's why you see today some very awkward spaces or awkward lease areas with this tenant lease. These spaces were funded with federal funds, mostly by Federal Aviation Administration, and I think I agree with the documentation that's presented today for your consideration to help us address those unique circumstances and maintain that control. You also have before you the entirety of the lease with Beta Technologies and the city of Burlington, or the airport, which I'm representing, and that lease itself has substantial control of the site, meaning there cannot be additional building on that site within that leased area or anywhere in that space without first our tenant coming to us, the airport, for permission prior to it ever coming back to the board, if there's anything. Not only would it have to come back to us, but we, again, under those unique circumstances, would have to protect those spaces for security and for airspace requirements. I think I covered my list there, if you're good with that.
No, I
Alex.
think that was good. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for that overview as the landowner. Definitely very helpful in the characterization of the tenant lease here. Before we dive in, I also just thought it would be helpful, maybe this comes from Beta as the applicant, to speak to, we're looking at an application that's come to us as a subdivision. If you can speak to the kind of the purpose and the why these particular subdivisions are being proposed.
Yeah. So we read the LDRs, and our interpretation of the LDRs is that for a land lease, you need to bring that in front of the Development Review Board for subdivision. So I think it's the way it reads, and Marlo spells it out here. But if you're subdividing more than, I think it's 2 lots, you need to apply for a subdivision. So that was our interpretation. I think that kind of what Nick spoke to is this is somewhat of a complex case, and I think we took sort of a narrow view on our lease without sort of looking at the overall picture here with the airport, and the other regulations.
Okay, so it sounds like it's kind of the lease is the mechanism that's prompting the subdivision. Yep. Is that how you're
that's right. Yeah,
okay.
The land lease. But
okay.
Quinn,
Great.
was your question why they're doing a lease or why they're in front of the board with their lease?
I guess both. The why is this considered a subdivision?
Okay.
And if that.
Okay, I just misunderstood your question.
Yeah. Okay.
Why is there a subdivision of land required?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, are you asking why are the parcels broken up in the way that they are, or yeah? That is really kind of what Nick spoke to. We wanted to lease this area. This was the area that was the airport had developed available to us. There's a lot of regulations that guide how they need to retain control of certain parts of this plot of land. So that's what kind of broke it up in the way that it's broken up.
And therefore, those three areas, or areas A, B, and C, are not included in the tenant lease with Beta, so that we can retain that control.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of an important distinction that Nick is making, and sort of what is spoken to in the write up that Marla did for us here. But we sorry, I'm forgetting where I was going. It really is sort of a tenant lease. There's a lot of flexibility in what the airport could do with the land, right? They own all of the land around it. It's a land lease, but in a lot of ways, I don't think that's necessarily the right way to look at this.
Can I ask a question here? So I guess one question I wonder, in terms of the requirement for a subdivision when it's a lease agreement, if the airport is leasing the land to Beta, it's not a sale, so the subdivision's kind of establishing property lines that have setbacks and all that. Why is this not just an internal agreement that provides an easement? Is this a perpetual lease agreement?
No, there's a term on it. Yeah.
So, because if once the lease ends, you're gonna have to revoke the subdivision to combine the lots. That's why I guess I'm wondering why this is a subdivision if it's just a lease.
Yeah, and I think that's the view that we're coming into it with. I wasn't involved in the conversations between Nick and Marla, but I think that is the view that we're taking on it.
Yeah, I don't see that we have any business messing with the lease. It's a subdivision. But I have another question. If the whole point of creating these internal lines was to make it clear that Beta was going to control stuff within, I don't know what it is, Area A and Area C, but not Area B, or whatever. Why can't you just do that with a plat? In other words, you do a lease, you draw the lease, you lay out the areas that the tenant can't use, or that in this area certain regulations comply. It's not a subdivision. It's none of our business, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
So Frank,
You go away and we get rid of a headache.
so Frank, are you suggesting that as a board we don't have jurisdiction over this?
Over the lease, I think if you start getting into the real, correct. Basically,
Thank you.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so just to
Or if we do, if it's a I'll put it a slightly different way. If they're going to stick with their quote subdivision, then we do have jurisdiction and we disregard the lease and the rules pertaining to subdivisions apply.
That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. And I'm not
If they want to have a lease, they draw a map. They say they make rules under the lease. You say you can't go here, you can't go there. It's not a subdivision. You can't separately. Now, the drawback is it's leased.
Right.
You can't separately, I would think, sell off
Nope.
parcel C. If you can live with that, then I don't think you need to be here. I think you just do a somewhat complicated lease.
Yeah.
That says where they can't go and what they have to do, and that's you get. I've said it 3 times.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we've done, and even if we talk about relinquishment of land or disposal of land or selling of land, that goes into a whole nother federal obligation standardization. So we agree and concur with what you're saying in what the recommended determination.
If you ever want to sell any of the land, you better come here to get a subdivision permit.
That's right. I assure you, we do not have that in our 100-year plan. Yeah.
so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So and other folks can jump in here. So what we have kind of in front of us as the first staff report is this kind of overview of we're being asked that this is a subdivision, and staff has very well presented and articulated that it is functionally a tenant lease. What we're hearing from you is that you agree with that.
Right.
This again, explanation and kind of decision that staff has put forward would have us acknowledge the subdivision, but also not acknowledge the subdivision. I'm sure you can see it's kind of a creative solution. And I think what you're hearing from the board and what we're trying to get at is maybe we don't need to have this creative solution, in which staff can correct me if I'm wrong here, of if there's another way to do it that would result in you withdrawing this application, us not having to look at this as a subdivision. So one, staff, is that kind of correct as a potential outcome? And then two, from the applicant, do you think there's a path to sort this out through a different complicated lease agreement that doesn't involve asking us to look at it as a subdivision?
They could withdraw. Well, so the option you laid out, the first option is the board issues this jurisdictional opinion.
Yep.
The reason we recommended that is they went for sketch, the hearing was warned. It's a little bit complicated to make the determination, and we as staff thought this was an opportunity to make an official paper trail on why, when someone goes and does a deed research on the airport, there's this plat recorded that there's no subdivision approval for. There is the option for them to withdraw, and everybody agrees that it's a lease and nothing needs to be done by the board. There was also the option for staff to make this determination, because we typically make the determination on whether something's a subdivision or not. We felt this was complicated enough that we wanted the board to weigh in.
Thank you for that reminder. So just, I'm saying this out loud for myself too, and for my other board members, it's helpful to what the draft decision we have here is more of a jurisdictional opinion than a decision, and just for documentation purposes. So given the discussion this far, I'm going to turn to the board and say, does anyone have concerns with that as a process of us kind of issuing this jurisdictional opinion as how we are participating on this? I'm looking at you, Frank.
Well, you want to, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. You want to go to council to get a jurisdictional opinion, or you don't?
No.
Have us? No, I'm fine saying, yeah, a little bell just went off in the back of my head. What can Beta do with the property?
Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Not without our.
Excuse me, what can, I asked the question, well, what can the airport, what rights of disposition of portions of the property is the airport retaining?
Rights of disposition.
In other words, you're going to lease, let's say there's a parcel A, parcel B, and parcel C.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. Can you lease parcel C to somebody else?
No. Yeah. Yeah. So
Can you lease can you lease any of the land to somebody else?
The lease document is in the packet, and we did actually review. So, Kelsey, city planner, was the reviewer. You know, things always get a second set of eyes on it before they go out the door. And Kelsey, being a land use attorney, did get eyes on this, and she brought up that same question. And so there is the right of the tenant can dispossess both the building and the lands, but the airport retains the right to prohibit them from doing so. It's not they must get approval before doing so. It's the airport has the right to prohibit them, which is a subtly different thing.
And I don't care about that so long. That's what I was saying. You can have as complicated a lease as you want.
Yeah.
But, if you're saying Area C is ours to dispose of to another tenant or to sell to a third party,
right,
then I would start to have a problem.
yeah, no. So that entire area, if you just take a congruent space around that entire area, it's obligated by both the lease and our federal obligations that we would not be able to do what you're insinuating.
And yeah, I don't think this is a concern of ours.
Okay. Any other?
Does this also include, because I remember the last time we were talking about the main building, fabrication building, I'm forgetting exactly what you call it. Is that also, because I don't see that in the drawings, are we also talking about this?
No, that's not part
separate.
of this application. No, yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
separate
where
and sort of
does
behind.
that stand with all this? from the previous meeting, kind of what we got down to was you guys built the building, paid to build a building.
Yep.
Now you would like to mortgage it to get some of that capital back to do something else with. But to do that, you needed a formal subdivision on the building so that the bank would give you the mortgage.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, is this, but the airport wasn't here. So does that make sense to you, or is that setting off warnings?
No, I think this is good because the total objection is to make sure we conform to the city's regulatory requirements and record what we need to record, what Beta needs to record, so that everything can proceed with the bank.
Okay.
And
So with that, do we have the authority? I guess I'm trying to figure out what's different between that and what we're looking at here. If it's all still under the lease.
So that
why
was
can
a
we do
different
this?
application. There's been two nearly concurrent Beta subdivision
Right.
applications. And so the one that was approved didn't have all of the problems with compliance with the dimensional standards. And so I think we never got to the point of scrutinizing it to the level we are now. Because, and possibly that shouldn't have been approved as a subdivision.
But that's kind of what I'm wondering, where we are now with the lease and whether we should have anything to do with it. It kind of sounds like that first one,
Maybe wasn't
we missed
done
something.
correctly. Right. But
Okay.
this has no bearing on that one because they're completely separate applications. And
So do
past
you,
mistakes do not require future mistakes.
No, that's
do you need a subdivision of land for this lease? Okay. So why aren't we? Okay. I
so-
I
That's why
support
we're
the
gonna-
withdrawal of this
So,
application.
and I guess that's my next question is, so understanding what the previous application was and why you wanted to do it, what is the need for this? Or is this just for the reason that, what can't you do within your lease negotiating with the airport?
I think it's just
That-
a question of they came to us and said, we want to put on these lot lines, lease lines. And we said, well, lease is a subdivision. You better submit an application. And we never went farther than that until we got into scrutinizing the actual application.
Stop calling
Okay.
them lot lines and we're done.
Yeah.
And don't call them lot, and if you record anything, it's a little interesting what you call this when you go to record it. But don't call it a lot line, make it clear on your drawing that these are not lot lines.
Yeah.
These are area A per the lease, or
Right.
per the lease, you know.
Yeah.
Anything but a lot line.
Right.
And property line is dark dashed line all the way around it, and these are just little faint little indicators that for.
So the board is comfortable with the option to issue a jurisdictional opinion for the purpose of accompanying what the applicant has to record in the land records to complete that record. Is that a fair
Do-
overview of
Do we
of kind of
need
what
to
we're
make
doing?
a jurisdictional decision, or can we just ask the applicant to withdraw? Then it's on them to make that choice.
Both
and-
options are on the table. We, as staff, are recommending the jurisdictional opinion in this case because it has gotten as far as it has gotten.
And
There
we
is
can talk
precedent.
further.
This isn't something we made up. City council had to issue a couple jurisdictional opinions during interim zoning because the rule was similarly, all applications for development must be granted approval to proceed under interim zoning. The LDRs say all ground leases are considered subdivisions, or all divisions of land for lease, right? The title of their document is ground lease. So it's the board's,
But there's no division of land.
right, so the board is making the determination that though they have chosen the words ground lease, which would normally be jurisdictional, what they're actually doing does not constitute division of land for lease.
I just thought of something. Is this a free, is the land that you are, is the whole, now when I'm talking about the land, I'm talking about the whole outer perimeter.
Okay.
To be clear. Is that land a distinct parcel, or are you subdividing it from the airport as a whole?
It's the latter piece, yeah.
All right, so that is a subdivision. That's the subdivision.
Sorry, I was taking notes. What is the subdivision?
The separation of what they're leasing, right, to Beta from the airport as a whole. Is
So
a
the
subdi-
901 acre?
No,
No.
that's the whole airport.
Currently, there's one parcel, which is the airport. And they need to get, oh, I'm sorry. There's one lot, right? It's the airport lot, right? And they need to get these little pieces
Right.
for some agreement with the bank or whatever they're doing, right? Does that require actual subdivision of the entire lot to get these pieces out? Or does it just require an agreement about use?
What's being subdivided is the outer perimeter of what they're leasing to him. Never mind the parcel A, parcel B, parcel C. That's not the subdivision part. The subdivision part is they're separating
Right.
the outer perimeter from the whole. This is the airport.
Yep.
This is what they're leasing, and then these little wavy lines in here where they can't do certain stuff. I don't care about that. What I do care about,
don't think that's
if
what
it's
it
a
is.
definite.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You follow what I'm saying?
I think I do, and I think Marty's going to pull up the plan. It's not so much that there's an outer boundary and they're cutting holes in it. It's that they're cutting 3 holes.
No, I don't care. I'm not talking about any of that stuff.
Okay, maybe I'm not following then.
I'm just saying, when they lease a big chunk of land that is part of a bigger chunk of land, under the definition of subdivision you just gave me, that's a subdivision.
Agreed.
But we don't have to worry about all the interior little stuff. We just have to worry about the outer perimeter. That's what they need a permit for.
What is the outer perimeter in this case?
The land that the entire piece, big chunk of land that they're leasing to Beta
So
is
there
the
should-
outer perimeter.
There should already be a subdivision then.
Is there a subdivision permit for that or not? It's part of the airport property, right?
I don't think so. I think it was similar to what we were talking about before, subdividing the entirety of that square, for lack of a better
Right, but
shape.
Beta doesn't control the land
They do not
within
control
that,
the land.
within any of this area that's shown on the screen.
Wait a minute.
It really is a use agreement, a use of what can be done within that space operationally.
So
Wait,
in
wait.
this area that's hatched, Beta owns the building.
Correct.
The airport owns the land and retains control of what can be done on the land. And the airport has granted the right to use the land.
No, that's
Beta.
solipsism. I was okay before, but that's solipsistic. What
That-
they're giving
that's
them,
what? What did you say?
too tricky for most lawyers. Okay. You got a big piece of land, it's called the airport. You got another chunk of land called chunk of land. They are giving Beta a ground lease on chunk of land, period. They're separating chunk of land from the great big chunk of land, from the great big piece of land called the airport.
I thought it's
What
a
is the
tenant
ground?
lease.
Yeah, what's a ground lease? In your
Ground lease
definition?
is they're leasing them that chunk.
For what? To do anything they want with?
No, the leases don't have to give you whatever you want. This called right to use is called a lease. If you can't
So
take
what
it back,
happens when I, as a landlord, lease a portion of my parcel to someone who owns a bit? You know, I own a strip mall,
right?
and I say, okay, business A, you're gonna lease the building and the area of the dumpster around in the back and the parking spaces in front of it.
Yeah.
Is that something that requires subdivision?
But you don't lease. When you do that on a strip mall, you don't do it like that. If they have the exclusive right to that area, then it's a lease. If you've marked it off and you've defined it, sometimes you can give an exclusive right. It is not a lease, but that's not this. All right. What you do in the strip mall case is they lease the building and they have a right of use in common of the they have an easement over the rest of the area. Typical commercial way in which it's done. You just have an easement, right? what they are giving Beta is the exclusive right of use for a period of time as a lease. End of discussion.
Can I ask?
End of declarative statement. The exclusive right of use for a period of time of a defined piece of land is a lease. Boom.
And you're saying it's a ground lease, not a so.
And I'm saying it's correctly titled. It's correctly titled as a ground lease. It also seems to be, of course, I'm not as up on the definitions as I should be, apparently a subdivision. But the only subdivision is the subdivision of the overall perimeter chunk that they're leasing to Beta from the airport. Airport, chunk, lease.
And the interior.
And the interior stuff is they can make it, they can write it in a way that's irrelevant, makes it irrelevant to our concerns.
I don't think I can agree with you because the plat calls out three. If you were to zoom into the words on the side, there's three separate lease area boundaries.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting that they call them something else. Restricted use areas. And I'm happy.
So one thing I'll add to the lease that we have today, this
But
isn't.
you still need a subdivision permit to separate the chunk from the airport. Did it happen in the past?
This is a current agreement. This is an authorized agreement with signatures on it. So this cannot change with the non-dashed areas because of the reasons
we're
before.
confusing two different things. And I'm sorry if I'm slower than everybody else here, but the airport exists. This chunk of land, the entire perimeter, does or does not exist in the land records as a right now, as a parcel distinct from the rest of the airport.
I don't think that does. Not like this. No.
Okay, in that
And
case,
in the perimeter.
in that case, creating this overall parcel of land, disregarding the interior stuff that you show on it, is the subdivision of the airport.
Which hasn't yet been done.
But that's what they're proposing to do. If they're giving a ground lease of the chunk,
I thought they called it a tenant lease.
I don't care what they call it.
It's
I care what they're doing.
Even if the area is not dashed out there, are not part of the lease.
Okay, somebody needs to point. Now you're looking at the map, which always makes me nervous. Help me understand.
So consider the outer perimeter of that entire space. Within the bottom right-ish corner, there's a non-hashed out area, as well as some drive lanes around that area. That is not part of this beta lease.
Well, then you have to change. Then you. Oh, wait a minute.
That's the federally regulated space that is required.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And the roadways going to and from that location as well as to the remaining airfield.
Showing a perimeter. Oh, and the roadway?
Yep.
Right.
The roadway doesn't meet our right-of-way standards.
In the smaller parcels. And that's what cannot be.
Let me ask this.
Yeah.
Let me ask this. You have other tenants, I assume, on the airport property, the flight school, there's a place that does engine work, I think, from prior testimony that we've heard. They have leases, similar leases are those on subdivided parcels?
Generally, yes, but the difference is most of those were not federally funded, or the adjacent spaces weren't federally funded. For example, the building that's in that non-hashed area, that was a federally funded project in and of itself, the building and the lots around it. All of these other leases don't have this unique circumstance like this. It's not a congruent space like this.
Can we just bring up a parcel map? Because I don't want to I just want to make sure we're clear about if that's true or not. Because I don't see the other buildings on a separate lot.
We
Right, like-
don't have other buildings on separate lots for the airport. Well, that's not true. I guess the aviation ave stuff does have separate lots. Our parcel map is a representation of how we
Okay,
generally
sure,
think
fine.
that it's not a legal document in any way.
Help me once again. Are you saying the road? Okay, well, they're done. Is the road is not part of the lease?
Correct.
All right. So in that case, and that's true of all the white areas.
That's correct.
All right. So there are in fact 3 parcels being subdivided out. There's this strange sort of trapezoidal, more or less, thing in the middle of the white. There's the big chunk to the left of the road,
Yep.
and there's the other stuff with the diagonal lines on it.
You got it.
That's 3 distinct parcels. Is that how they're described? in
That's how the
lease?
lease is described. Yep.
That's a subdivision, fellas. I misunderstood. I apologize. Why don't you? Why can't the roads be part of the lease?
Those roads, various reasons, as I mentioned, one, the security and the access to that particular gate, there is a fence that goes through most of this space right here too, is one of our primary access points for emergency, both egress and ingress, as well as the federally funded portions of this space right here, including the building and the associated roadway. This also is not just used by Beta, it's used by every single tenant on this airfield, including ourselves, to access that particular facility. So because of security and safety rules, federal funding, and accessibility, we are not allowed to lease that space out.
Is there any way you could just do a lease of the whole block and then write into the lease a perpetual easement?
No, because those spaces are 100% federally funded. We can't have any, we have to have a free and clear area associated with those spaces. So unfortunately, no.
Sorry. Just to pull back kind of where we were and where we're at. So the draft decision jurisdictional opinion staff gave us identified, we have the ground lease from the airport and Beta, and staff has outlined how it is functionally a tenant lease. We have heard from Frank that his interpretation is that it is functionally a ground lease. So that's just what I'm hearing right now. And if other folks want to weigh in on that or ask further questions, I just wanted to kind of give that high level summary.
I was going to ask another question, the Beta and airport. You can't do this in a user agreement. It has to be a document that needs to be recorded in the land records that shows Beta has some kind of level of ownership of that land, right? Lease of that land.
Interest in real property.
Right. Interest in real property.
Yeah.
So then your original parcel, the airport parcel, needs to show a division of the ownership in land records, interest in land records, for this to work. And the definition says if you're going to devise the lot, tract, or parcel for lease, sale, or development, it's a subdivision. I think that's pretty clear, and I think Frank is correct.
Right. I just don't understand about the roads. I don't understand why you can't just close that gap, say we're leasing the whole thing. And basically, my solution was going to be, that's what I was going to suggest, was what Mark was suggesting. You take back a perpetual easement.
Yeah, that's something that we cannot do. We would be breaking our federal obligations, both on Homeland Security as well as federal aviation obligations.
Your lawyers have told you that?
Yes, sir.
So I have a question for staff. the definition that Charlie just gave with subdivision is for the purpose of lease, and it's probably outlined, but how is a tenant lease not under the subdivision if it's so I guess I'm trying to.
Yep. So Charlie missed an operative word
Oh, I'm
when he
sorry.
summarized it.
Look,
The operative word is the division of land.
Right. Tenant lease has no meaning.
Right. That's what I was trying to get at. So it can do just like a user agreement, right? Oh, we're not going to use this. We are going to use that, right? They'd be fine. But I think what they need to achieve is to show they have some level of interest in the land to the bank, because I'm not going to get into that. That's your funding. That's your problem, right? But they need to show some kind of
I think it
recorded.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
cut
that's.
you off.
I mean, if you guys can figure that out and you don't need a subdivision land, I'm ready to go home, right? If you don't need a
I mean,
land
I
record-
guess I would say that we concur with what the draft recommendation is, because it does satisfy. Again, I can't speak for Beta and their obligations on the bank, but it does satisfy, to the best of my knowledge, what they need to do
then-
to satisfy the city
then
regulation.
withdraw your application. We can all go home.
No,
But
That's
but
on
that
you.
won't. Well, I think based on everything that we're saying, that's up to you on the decision of tonight.
So I will just throw, we do have the alternative staff report that goes through the subdivision requirements.
actually, I have a prior question. When you created these roads, it just dawned on me. Yeah,
Speak up, Frank.
When you created the roads, that was a subdivision.
They're not actually roads. So if you were to look at this same place with an aerial image, it's more like paint on pavement.
We call them vehicle service roads
Yeah,
from
but-
an airport perspective, but definitely not roads.
But are they
from a-
defined somewhere? Are they before you ever got to doing this thing with Beta? You know, if we were to, could we go to the land records and find those
No,
meets and bounds, those defined areas?
No.
not in your records, no.
There was one that disappeared. There was one for this hangar a long time ago. But it was smaller and different shape, but once their lease started, it went away.
But not for the roads.
Not for the road.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my ignorance of the relevant federal regulations is impairing me here. I don't know. You know, I don't know why. In other words, I don't know why you didn't need a subdivision before to show where the federal rights were and where they weren't. How do you know?
How would we do that on the
How have you been
entirety?
able to define them if you don't have a pre-existing plat somewhere that shows where they are?
The roads?
Yeah.
How would we define the roads or the taxiways associated with the entirety of the airport?
That's just for the planes to follow a circulation out, and those lines pretty much follow these exact
Exactly.
angles. So it's not a road, it's just like.
But
it's like
when,
the
when
taxiway.
when they made the deal with the feds, how did they describe these? Did you really say, we're going to draw some lines on the asphalt and we
Yes.
promise you certain things about where the lines are on the
Yes,
asphalt?
yeah. This isn't in city records, but we have our own federal, nor do we think that we need to. These are our own federal obligations that we have to submit to the FAA on where runway center lines are and where our vehicle service roads are and where our taxiways. That is no different than everything else associated with our airport.
Okay, so you just give them a drawing, a photograph? How do you define it? No one says meets and bounds, you don't get a surveyor out there?
There's surveys, there's everything associated with that,
Well,
including on our master plan.
Also, there is a survey.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so it only becomes a subdivision, all right, it only becomes a subdivision now that you're trying to carve out those areas and do something with it. Why can't you, what use does Beta have for The right hand, I'm looking at it, I can't see it too well, the right-hand side. In other words, why couldn't you just lease to bait everything to the left of where the road is?
Yeah, I mean, we use it for a number of different things. We've got containers that are used for testing on
I
some.
can't hear you.
We use it for a number of different things. That we have our charge pad out there, and containers that we use for testing and other things. But the other piece of this, it is an airport, so it's kind of a unique case in that we also like park our aircraft on a lot of this land.
Yeah,
So what we're
everything you
trying to-
see in front of the building, including some of the spaces to the right, are exactly what Alex is talking about. That's aircraft storage, there's movement, there's paved areas, all of that is paved. And then you can see all those squares in there. Those are all exactly what Alex was describing. Connex boxes or shipping containers, as well as a landing pad, which is the larger square up there. There's a lot of different various uses within that space.
Does the lease, I'm going to switch to a slightly different aspect. Does the lease have a term? How long's the lease?
30, 10, and 10.
Yeah, 30.
What is it?
30, 10, and 10, I believe. I might be mixing it up in my
I
head.
apologize for the inordinate amount of time I took earlier. This is a 3-lot subdivision without any question. It has to meet the 3-lot subdivision standards, and we are limited by whatever discretion, whatever the limits of discretion we have, and I don't know what they are. That's what governs what we can do to help them, beyond beyond imposing the rules for a 3-lot subdivision, lot by lot. I'm sorry. I thought I was giving you a way out.
Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a unique case here, which I think is sort of why we came to the conclusion that this might be considered a tenant lease. Or I wasn't there for that meeting, but after reading the document, I mean, I think the airport, like after the term of this lease, is likely like this could be changed to any sort of other use case, right? Like this isn't sort of what I would consider a traditional subdivision where you might subdivide the land into parcels and then those parcels are sort of maintained indefinitely, right? After the 30-year period, these boundary lines will likely be completely changed depending on what the airport's using it for at a later date. So I think that's where we sort of come to you with the consideration to consider this a tenant lease instead of a land lease, given that this is sort of a unique situation on the airport. But
I'm finally out of stuff to say. I mean,
yeah.
Look at somebody else.
So if it's,
Does anyone else?
I say, if we agree with the good lawyer here, that this is we need to consider this a subdivision, which is different than maybe where some of us thought we were going to go. We have to sort of return to some thinking that we were doing the first time that we had the hearing. So what jurisdiction do we have? I am trying to remind myself now of like, okay, if this is a subdivision, I think one of the sticking points, again, this was 2 months ago now. So we were talking about how to widen the road and like how to like make this comply with the land use regulations.
There's a second staff report.
Okay.
There's a second staff report that goes through that. So it sounds like we should go in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to offer this up to the applicant, right?
Yeah.
If you don't need a land record, which I think is what's tripping us up here, then I suggest withdrawing your application now, or it sounds like we need to go through a subdivision.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. We don't think this is a subdivision, so I think we would reconsider either requesting what the draft determination is of the no jurisdiction or a withdrawal. And we'd have to get back to you on that final decision. But there's no change to the lease that would occur based on this conversation. The lease lines are going to stay the same. We cannot move forward with changing those lines or altering the control of that space. So I think that's why we would have to work with Marla and staff to understand what the implications of withdrawal might be.
I'm sorry, guys. Whether it's a 3-lot subdivision or a 1-lot subdivision, it's still a subdivision. If you'd read the definition again.
You want me to read it out loud?
What's the definition of a subdivision?
I'm going to skip the second sentence because it's about amending subdivisions, but I can go back to it if you want me to. The division of a lot, tract, or parcel of land into 2 or more lots, tracts, or parcels of land, or other divisions of land for sale, development, or lease.
Or lease, you said, right? Okay. So this is at a minimum, never mind this long digression into the 3 lots, but you have at least 2 lots that are being created. Let's assume that all this federal stuff didn't matter. Get back to the earlier point.
They already have a lease in place for this land. It's already in place. Is what
Charlie, speak up, please.
they're saying they already have a lease in place for this lot of land for Beta already. So we're not talking about that, I guess, at this point. Maybe there should have been a subdivision for that, but they
Yeah.
say they have a lease in place already.
Well, then they're in violation.
So,
Yeah, we don't think so, but yeah.
so at this point, we do have a staff report that walks through the subdivision requirements. I'm also hearing from the applicant that maybe you want to reconvene and think about what is being proposed here. We can go through the staff report. A lot of that was asking for, evidence to support legal constraints, to not, because this subdivision isn't compliant with a lot of what's required. So I think the board is here to use our time as helpful as it's going to be for you. We can walk through that report, or if you are feeling like you just want to kind of reconvene and figure out if there's a different approach here, we can do that as well. But we have the staff report to go through if
I would want the board to, if, regardless of whether you go through the subdivision criteria or not, I would probably still ask the board to sort of sleep on it. Re-review the lease document itself, see where you land, and probably in deliberative session do a straw poll on whether you consider this to be a subdivision before you move forward with issuing a subdivision decision. But that's not
makes
to
sense.
contradict anything you said.
Yep. So yes, that will happen regardless. But we are, which road do you want to go down tonight as far as what would be helpful?
I don't think it would be the best use to go through the responses to the subdivision tonight. I think we would appreciate the deliberation on the choices out there right now, and I would also ask to maybe going back to what you were saying, Frank, about a single subdivision in there and what the ability to do that is on the exterior of this space.
Yeah, I mean, go back to the feds and say, look, it's a fig leaf for the locals. Just let us close these lines in principle, but nothing else is going to change. We will retain complete control. I mean, I recognize there's a certain. I don't want to use this word absurdity twice in the same meeting.
Ridiculousness.
There's a certain awkwardness, shall we say. We've hung up in the definition, but we have to. I mean, we have to live by the words in the document, in the rule.
If we continue the meeting, continue this to another hearing, right? You obviously have been able to make leases, and they're must be legal or else they're not. So maybe provide us a reason. We obviously have this definition here. Why a lease which inherently subdivides the land, right? Somehow says this land is designated for a certain use, right? Why that can't just be applied here if it's technically legal on other parts of the parcel?
Well, have you really done that on other parts of the parcel? You just let people lease buildings. Have you carved out chunks of land? And
Yeah,
said,
mostly buildings, including our larger portions and more unique circumstances on some of the functions of the airport. Yeah.
have you given
we'd have to-
people leases saying this, and outlined a chunk of land and said, this is yours for an exclusively for a period of time?
No. In fact, most of the spaces we can't give exclusive ability, especially inside of the fence.
And if you have an existing lease for, when you say this parcel or what you're doing here, I assume then you're here for an after-the-fact permit that you should have gotten in the first place. That's my working assumption.
Yeah, I think we need to reconsider and maybe talk to our legal counsel on this too, because we don't agree with
I would
your
have-
interpretation. So.
I would welcome an argument that makes it work.
Perfect.
I've been trying to come up with it.
One thing I wanted to note, Frank, you asked about previous leases at the airport and how they've been addressed. We have been in front of the board before with subdivision of leased land, and during that time, I'm not saying right or wrong, it was determined that yes, you can subdivide this lease, but the land development regulations don't apply. So you don't have to meet all the specific requirements of those subdivision regulations. And that is how that's the most recent one I was part of, is how that was dealt with. So when you're reconsidering, think about if there's a way that could be possible because of all the restrictions the airport has.
When was that?
It was SD, that was for the rental car facility, probably in 2018, 2017.
And I think,
So-
I'm sorry, and I
Was
think
that-
Marla does hit on that. If we decide we want to go down the subdivision path, right, then we go into the staff report, and the first thing that pops up is modification and waiver, right? And we can start waiving requirements, but we all need to agree we want to go down the subdivision path.
Yeah, so that's a possibility. And again, I think we touched on this when you guys first came to us with this of, relying significantly on those like legal constraints given that there's this federal component here. So it is possible that that was the outcome in the past and that sufficient evidence was given to provide to the board, making us comfortable with waiving all those requirements. But I think that's, if we go down that path, that's something that's not been provided to us yet, in part because we weren't sure we were going to go down that path. So yes, that is potentially an option as well.
Actually, I'm sort of trying to make the cobwebs come together. There is we do have to, we can't impose any requirement in contravention of a federal requirement. We're subordinate to federal law. So that could be, not saying it is, arguably a basis for a waiver of any
So
conflicting requirement of ours.
do we need subleases on any plots of land at the airport then?
I think that's our question.
Well,
Isn't that a legal question for your
It's a
legal
legal
counsel?
question.
Yeah, I don't.
It's a legal question.
talk to your lawyers, ask them to use their imagination and their skills to come up with a coherent argument about.
I think we might, because I think we're going to have more situations like this as we continue to grow and develop. So I think we're going to need
So maybe it's worth the time.
Yeah.
Great, we'll figure it out on this one. Board members, anything else? Yes, we need to continue. I just want to make sure. Anything else you want to hear from us? Do you feel like you have direction?
No, yeah, I think we're fine. Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
all good?
So I move continuation of SD 2501 to a future date of,
Well, it depends. Do you want them to submit new information, or do you want to just talk about it and they talk about it and come and talk to you about it some more?
I think that's what we.
Yeah, I think that.
And
yeah.
I think we need to get our counsel. I mean, all these are legal questions, and me reviewing this more is not going to give me any clarity as to what the underlying law says.
So it would
So-
be helpful for me to get a question statement to provide to our legal team from you guys, and then also to understand what the expectation is of them. Because right now I haven't heard anything. If they call me up tomorrow and say, so what do they want from me? I'm going to say, I don't know.
Can we schedule a meeting?
Look,
Have the attorney actually come and we can have a conversation?
Like a deliberation meeting?
Yeah, anything, because
Yeah.
any question that we write out is going to spawn more questions. It seems like it would be a lot more beneficial to have you present basically what happened tonight. They could watch the film, they could watch the video.
Lucky them.
Yes, I'm sure they'll enjoy it. And figure out, okay, these are the issues, and they can brush up if they need to. So I don't know how esoteric we're getting here. And then come talk to us about where the city would stand on that, where they would recommend that we go.
Okay.
Because I absolutely appreciate Frank's opinion and his expertise. But if we end up in litigation or something, Frank is not going to be the one that's going to have to be defending the board.
Right.
So
Okay.
I think it would be very useful to have that second opinion. And then maybe they'll come up with some idea that Frank was saying, some argument that allows us to get around this and we can all be happy. But I'm not going to get there by looking at it.
I'm seeing some head nodding. What do you want the applicant to bring to you?
That they actually need a land record to do what they want to do. That needs to show a subdivision of land.
We don't need that. We don't need a. I guess I don't think we need a. Well, we need a document. Right. In that point, I would withdraw. But yeah, we need a record saying that we have some level of control over this land. I don't know that we need a record saying that we need a subdivision, though. Yeah. Right.
The question.
Yeah.
The question is, take a look at the land development take a look at the land development regulations. Are you creating a for question one? Are you creating a subdivision? The presumption is you are. If not, cogent, very persuasive argument about why not. Okay. And by the way, that includes carving out the larger, you see, because I think what I'm looking at is, based on everything I've heard, is a 4-lot subdivision. What I started out calling a chunk, which is really 3 chunks, that's one. That creates the airport and and the big lot, and then you got a couple of more. That's 2 plus 2 is 4.
There's no line breaking the white space from the bigger white space, though.
Pardon?
There's no line. There's no subdivision of land breaking. If you can zoom in to like points 418 up at the top, there's no subdivision between the areas that's not shaded and the remainder of the 901 acre.
Right,
No, farther up.
What do you mean there isn't?
You're creating 3 new lots. You still end up with an old one, which is the 4th lot, right?
Right.
So those are the questions. Now, it may be, I mean, I think you're getting the hint, at least I am, that the board as a whole wants to enable this for you. So we're all kind of stymied.
Yeah, and I think what we'd like to do is we'd like to go back and see if we feel like we have a justification for peeling this back.
But the other
and then
thing you can do is,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of questions, if you come to the honest conclusion that, yeah, it's a 4-lot subdivision, then get your lawyers to look at our waiver capacity.
So that's also in your packet already.
Yeah, right.
They're
Look at all the things you want to be able to do that don't meet the letter of the subdivision regulations, and have your lawyers come up with why each of those is a waivable matter for us.
and that's in the packet already, right? That's
where we start.
Their lawyer already calls it a 3-lot subdivision. So.
With waivers.
Right, and I think that we got there because no one ever asked the question of, is this really a subdivision?
Well, tell them to consider whether it's a 4-lot subdivision, which is what it is. Okay.
Remind me why you think it's a 4-lot? Because of the road?
airport,
Oh,
The
I see.
remaining parcel.
I see.
yeah.
Okay,
then,
got it.
Then this,
Got it.
yeah, okay.
But isn't the 3rd lot the airport and this little weird convoluted
Yes.
curve going
Right.
inside?
Yes. That's the 4th.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
There are 3 new chunks you want to split out of the balance of the 4th.
The island's a separate lot.
Right, but the white part is cohesive to the airport.
Yes.
Right,
That's
that's
what I mean.
that's part of the
Oh,
fourth
right,
lot.
right,
The
yeah,
airport's
yeah.
one,
The
two,
airport
three,
is,
and then the airport.
yes, yeah,
Yep.
so it's a 4 lot, so yes.
All right, you see what I'm getting at, a rationale for each waiver, figure out what waivers you need and a rationale for each waiver. We're asking you to do a lot of work, we have to do a lot of work on our end.
Right, I think we provided that, but I think the alternate question is either we redact this or come up with a different solution.
Yes. Is it a subdivision? And if the answer is yes, go through the waiver items.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mark.
I guess ultimately, if you guys work it out that you feel that this is not a subdivision and it totally can be done internally, they can just withdraw the application prior to the next meeting.
Except if they do that, they're highly suspect at this point.
Well, and I think that's why staff, I brought up that point earlier in the meeting, and so staff had recommended, if that's the decision, that there's some type of opinion from the board that goes on the record, given where this is at this point. So it is clear. But we are not there yet,
But
so,
hopefully
but
we
that's.
agree with that opinion,
Right.
and they're willing to issue that.
What do you think is clear?
No, so if they decide, if they present an argument that persuades us that it is not a subdivision, that does not exist yet, then we would issue an opinion similar to the one that's in our packet to kind of make a full story in the land record, given how
that
far this
opinion
has
would
come.
have to be defended by the city.
That would, the city would be comfortable
Okay,
with
which
as
means
well.
we want
Yes.
to ask our attorney. Okay, I see.
I mean, okay, so I just need to push, I'm okay with the attorney and talking to them in this case. I would like to make a general statement about use of the city attorney, right? Every decision the board makes, the city has to defend. There is a trust, an assumed trust in this board that you are appointed to these positions to make these decisions on the behalf of the city. And so the expectation is that you're making these decisions in making the interpretations in the best possible way with the regulations as they are.
Right, we're the first line of defense in the
Right.
quasi-judicial.
If the city wanted the city attorney to make all the decisions, they would have written that authority into the land development regulations.
Yeah, every decision we make should be with the eye of being defensible and not having to be defended. But if it is, it's defensible based on the LDRs and us interpreting them as such.
Right.
But I would have to say, it's rare that we push back and say we'd like the city attorney to help us out with this, isn't it?
No.
No? Okay.
And I'll just go on record by saying I really disagree with that philosophy. But there are many other places where the board actually hires an attorney and the attorney is present at all meetings, planning board, zoning boards, in order to answer those questions of law as they come up. We rely on Frank for that. With Frank not here, I think a lot of our decisions would be far less sound than they are. So we're doing that. We have ongoing legal representation as long as Frank is here. And I think Frank does an excellent job at that, and I greatly appreciate Frank doing that for us. But I think it's a questionable way to premise the existence of the board, that we're just going to have a land use attorney who's always willing to help.
And I tend to agree more with you than I do with Marla. Because I'm not, I mean, we all bring what we've got to the board. I bring a little of that. Mark brings a lot of something else.
Should we move
and we
to?
put it together as best we can.
Yeah.
But we
Continue.
are the decision makers, but when we need, when board members feel the need of a formal legal opinion, they ought to get it.
All right.
Now, I think one of the things, the unspoken thing here is that I think you don't ask a city employee, you ask a retained lawyer, and that goes ka-ching, right?
All right, so with the goal of continuing, anything else from, okay. So
Looking for
back to the
other
schedule.
information
Yes.
from the applicant.
Yep,
So in order to be on the March 18th meeting, we would need your materials by March 5th, 7th-ish. Ideally the 5th, but if you can tell me what's coming on the 5th, I can make space and plan our schedules if you actually arrive on the 7th. What's that?
I have a question about what we mean in this case by new materials. I'm assuming it would be something like a legal opinion.
Yeah. I think it's a legal
Right,
opinion.
so if you're asking for the city attorney to review the legal opinion we received from them, that takes time, and the packet is published a week before the hearing. So we're asking for us as staff to have a week to review the materials, and then the board to have a week to review the materials. And that's where we come up with the 5th.
You guys feel like you got enough direction?
Yeah, and I don't know that we have anything else to provide. I think we did get a lot of feedback from both legal teams, which is what you're seeing in the packet. So assuming the first route doesn't work out for us, then I think we have done the homework, and we feel comfortable with what legal sort of evidence we've provided and what we have in this application already. So I don't think we necessarily feel like we have to present anything else. I don't know if there's a way we can get on the next meeting agenda.
You can, but I think the board is asking for an argument as to whether this is a subdivision or not, which I don't think has been presented. What's been presented in your attorney's memo is whether there are legal constraints preventing you from compliance with the subdivision regulations. Is that incorrect?
No, yeah, I think that's right. So I guess we would have to go back to them.
Can you pull up the beginning of their letter? Right. If I'm reading the beginning of your letter, your attorney basically says approval for a 3-lot subdivision. So we need to go down the subdivision route based off of just the language that's in your letter.
No, it's not.
And I don't think he should be. I don't want to send you down the wrong path. After having gone through this exercise, I'm pretty convinced the only thing wrong with that sentence is that it should say 4-lot subdivision, but that's a technical point. We know what he meant.
So yeah, I guess I wonder if we've got to make a determination on whether or not we want to, we feel like this is a subdivision or not, and talk to our council about that. I guess if we ultimately decide that we are going to go down the road of considering this a subdivision, and we didn't feel like we had anything else to provide, I guess when would we have to make that determination to get onto the next agenda?
Now.
Right now, yeah, okay.
The state law is that it has to be continued to a date certain.
Yeah.
During public session.
Got it.
There's no harm in assuming it is.
Yeah.
For now. And then if it comes up that it isn't, then I'll change.
Yeah, could we?
They can ask for a date, and then if during the course of the review they find they need a continuance, they can ask for a continuance for us to make that request at the next date. Correct?
Yes. So you'd have to have that request made. Well, I suppose anytime before the next hearing.
Right.
Quinn and Don, are you looking to end the meeting? Is that?
Oh yeah.
We could continue to look at the rest of the packet, right? You know, if we want to
Well,
go down that
that's-
route.
So I
think-
guess
I
I'm
think
a
we'd
little
like to-
confused because
That he didn't want to do that.
Right. I think there's a lot that we need to consider to move this forward, and to work with the city staff, and to work with our legal counsel on what our next actions are.
Yeah, so it seems like you guys do need time to potentially submit more information before we see you again, because that.
I just want to be
Is that
clear,
correct?
there's nothing more that we're going to be submitting, right? We've submitted a subdivision, we called it a subdivision, we asked for the waivers, we submitted the waiver justifications, and we're now being directed to look at potential action of non-jurisdiction. So I think we need some legal guidance on what to do next.
Okay, so your position is you wouldn't submit anything more to us, but you would get legal guidance before we walk through the staff report
To
that we
determine
currently
if
have.
subdivisions are required at
So
the
you might
airport,
not be submitting anything new. You might just come with more arguments at the next hearing.
Guys, I really recommend that you not. Look, I am sorry, I did not and I apologize, I did not look at the memorandum before I got here. I couldn't deal with the packet. I tried to download it onto here, and I can only get up to about page 60 on this 200-page packet.
Speak up, Frank, please.
All right, I didn't see the memorandum before. I see, but I will look at it carefully after the fact. I see it's from Jeff Hand, which means it's of good quality. So at least it was going to be well-reasoned. And if he thought it was not a subdivision, he would have said so. And if I thought it was not a subdivision, as I was trying to do, I would have said so. But that ain't where it's at. It's a subdivision. Don't waste too much time with that. That's my thought. You can do as you please, but that would be
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we need to consider, going back to the original direction of the subdivision and requesting the waivers where.
So what I'm hearing is you guys would be comfortable with the next meeting, knowing that you wouldn't submit anything new.
Yeah, I think it's either like, it feels like the path forward is either we're gonna feel like we can withdraw the application, or yeah, we're not gonna submit anything new and we have the waivers. We've already submitted the waivers in this packet that we would submit. So yeah, I'm
But I'm
comfortable.
just confirming you guys did not want to go through that tonight.
No, I think we'd like to regroup. And,
because we did have that available, but
yes,
Pretty
yes,
burned.
yeah, and I think we're pretty burned.
Yeah.
I just wanted the irony of continuing when it's in front of
Yeah,
us. That's
yeah,
all
yeah,
I just
yeah.
wanted to acknowledge. Okay, so the next meeting would be
March 18th.
No, March
No.
4th.
March 4th.
Oh.
An old military holiday. March
Uh-huh.
4th. Get it?
Okay, good.
Oh,
Folks at 9 o'clock.
March.
I'd entertain a motion
I already made that motion.
Or
To-
to March 4th?
to
Yes.
March 4th.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will turn it back over to
All right, thank you,
Dawn.
Quinn. I'm so glad you did that. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the minutes of January 21st.
That was a help.
I
It
move-
took a lot of time.
I move acceptance of the minutes.
So moved? Or are you moving?
I'm moving.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, they are approved. And other business? The only thing I would raise is that there were some of us who had some questions about city council's review of a project that we looked at before. And I asked Marla if we could talk about that, but she can't share anything about that.
Yeah.
I can
Sure, but if we're gonna
share what I saw
talk about that, do you want to do it in public meeting, or do you want to go and close the meeting
and then talk about it.
and then talk about it?
Well, so you can only deliberate on projects.
Well, we can close the meeting and chat.
And go into a deliberative session, right?
No, there's
Why
nothing to, there's nothing to deliberate on.
Oh,
We can
then.
just chat.
You can't discuss board matters in larger than a quorum, and I'm agreeing with you that if it's not a board matter, which it's not,
Right.
you can talk as human beings.
Yes. That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay.
Chat.
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Do you dare? Okay. The meeting is now adjourned.